The transport ship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of designation 77 Alpha, what the locals called Prime. Sat strapped into his acceleration harness, eyes closed but far from asleep. His fingers traced the ridged scar tissue on his throat, a habit he'd picked up over the last 3 years. The marks were smooth now, almost like polished metal, 3 parallel lines that ran from just below his jaw down to his collarbone. The other soldiers in the transport bay gave him space. They always did, was used to it by now. In the Galactic Coalition forces, humans were still new, still strange, still mostly unknown. Earth had only joined the Coalition 15 years ago after first contact had gone surprisingly well. The diplomats had been curious, even friendly. They'd shared technology, offered trade agreements, and extended an invitation to join the greater galactic community. What they hadn't expected was that humans would be so eager to fight. Opened his eyes as the transport banked hard left. Across from him sat a heavy weapons specialist, all 8 feet of scaled muscle and bony ridges. The alien's name was something, could never quite wrap his tongue around the clicking sounds in the middle. Though was staring at him again, those triple-lidded eyes fixed on the scars at its throat. "You want to ask," said, his voice carrying that slight rasp that never quite went away. "Everyone does." This head crest flattened against his skull, a sign of embarrassment in his species. "Apologies, human. It is considered rude among my people to inquire about battle scars without invitation." "But you're curious," smiled, though he knew it probably looked predatory to the alien. Human smiles often did. "It's fine. We've got 20 minutes until insertion. Might as well pass the time." Around the transport bay, other soldiers were pretending not to listen. A pilot, all 4 arms busy with equipment checks. 2 scouts, their crystalline bodies refracting the red emergency lighting into rainbow patterns. Even the human contingent, 3 Marines from the European Defense Force, had their attention drifting his way. "The scars," said slowly, "they are not from energy weapons, not from blades either. The pattern is unusual." His hand went to his throat again. Even through his combat suit's neck seal, he could feel the ridges. "No, not weapons. These are from something called a Bigfoot. Well, technically, we called them Sasquatch in the old days, or Yeti depending on where you were. Big creatures, hair all over, walked on 2 legs like us but built more like you." The pilot chittered something that the translator rendered as laughter. "Human tells the stories again. Your species has such interesting mythology." "Not mythology," said quietly. "Not anymore." That got their attention. The whole transport bay went silent except for the rumble of the engines and the hiss of recycled air. 20 years ago," began, "before first contact, before anyone knew there were aliens out there watching us, I was part of an elite human military unit. We called ourselves SEALs, Sea, Air, and Land Specialists. We trained to operate in any environment, any condition, any threat level." He shifted in his harness, the memories coming back sharp and clear. "I was 26 years old, cocky as hell, and absolutely certain that I was one of the toughest bastards on planet Earth. My team got assigned to a weird one. Remote research station in the Canadian Rockies had gone dark. No communications, no supply drops acknowledged, nothing. Command wanted eyes on it." "Your superiors suspected enemy action?" asked. "Maybe, or wildlife, or equipment failure. We didn't know. That was the point of sending us. 6 of us went in via high-altitude drop, full winter warfare gear. The station was supposed to have 20 people. Scientists studying climate data, seismic activity, that kind of thing." Paused, organizing his thoughts. The scouts had moved closer, their crystalline faces tilted in that way that indicated intense focus. "We found the station abandoned. Not attacked, not destroyed, just empty, food still in the mess hall, some of it fresh. Beds unmade like people had just gotten up. But no people, no bodies, no blood, just empty buildings in the middle of nowhere." "The scientists had evacuated?" one of the human Marines asked. "That's what we thought at first, but their vehicles were still there, snowed in. Their emergency supplies were untouched, and there were tracks everywhere around the perimeter. Big tracks, really big, barefoot prints in the snow, each one almost 2 feet long." The pilot's translator crackled with static, a sign the AI was having trouble processing whatever sound the alien made. "Tracks from a large predator. We didn't know what they were from. Command said stay put, investigate, report findings, so we set up in the main building and started cataloging everything. That first night we heard it, this sound like nothing else. Imagine the lowest note you can think of, then go lower. It vibrated in your chest, made your teeth ache, and it was angry. His hand was at his throat again, fingers tracing the scars. We went on full alert, night vision, thermal imaging the works, and that's when I saw it for the first time. 10 feet tall, maybe more, covered in dark fur, arms long enough to drag on the ground, but it walked upright, and its face, it looked almost human. Almost. A previously unknown megafauna species said, "Your Earth has many extreme environments. It is not unreasonable that large predators remained undiscovered." That's what I thought too, at first. His voice had gone soft, almost dreamy with remembrance. We had it on thermal, this massive heat signature circling the compound, but it wasn't hunting us. It was looking for something. We could hear it making these calls, deep and loud, and other calls answering from further away. There were more of them out there in the dark. The transport lurched as it dropped altitude. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, announcing 15 minutes to landing zone. Talked faster, knowing the story had them hooked now. The second night they came closer. We counted at least 4 distinct individuals. My team leader wanted to make contact, try to communicate. We were scientists at heart, even if we carried guns. So we went out with lights and cameras, trying to appear non-threatening. Laughed, but there was no humor in it. That was our first mistake. These things, these Bigfoot or Sasquatch or whatever they were, they didn't want contact. They wanted us gone. One of them rushed the perimeter, moving faster than anything that big should move. It grabbed Johnson, one of my team, and threw him. Just picked him up and threw him like he weighed nothing. He hit the wall of the building so hard we thought he was dead. The scouts made a harmonic sound of distress, nodded at them. He lived, but he was out of the fight. Broken ribs, punctured lung, concussion. The rest of us opened fire not to kill but to drive it back. Standard deterrent fire aimed low, and it worked. The creature backed off, but the sound it made. He trailed off, remembering that howl of rage that had echoed through the mountain valley. They attacked in force the next night. All of them. We found out later there were 7 in the family group. 7 of these massive creatures coordinating their assault like a military unit. They threw logs at the buildings, smashed windows, tore down our antenna array. We were cut off, no way to call for help, and these things were systematically destroying our shelter in the middle of a Canadian winter. "You fought them," one of the human Marines said. "It wasn't a question. We didn't have a choice. It was fight or freeze to death. We set up a defensive position in the main building and held them off. But they were smart. They didn't just charge in mindlessly. They probed for weaknesses, worked together, used the environment against us. And they were strong. I watched one of them rip a steel door off its hinges like it was made of paper." His voice had gone harder now, colder. The voice of a man remembering a battle. "They got through our defenses around midnight. 2 of them came through the wall, not the door, just smashed right through the reinforced wall like it wasn't there. That's when everything went to hell." The transport shuddered again, descending toward the landing zone. Kept talking, knowing he had to finish before they hit dirt. Close quarters combat with something that big is like fighting a bear while it's also fighting like a trained martial artist. They knew where to hit, how to grab, how to use their weight. We lost in the first 30 seconds. One of them picked her up and slammed her into the floor so hard her neck snapped. No hesitation, no mercy, just brutal efficiency. The aliens in the transport were completely still now. Even's crest had gone flat. I emptied my rifle into the one that killed. Point-blank range, full magazine, center mass. It barely slowed down. These things, their bones were dense, their muscle was thick, and their pain tolerance was off the charts. It took everything we had just to drive them back long enough to barricade ourselves in the basement. Swallowed hard, his throat working around the old scar tissue. We were trapped down there for 6 hours. They didn't leave. They waited. We could hear them above us, moving around, testing the doors, searching for a way in. That's me. I was posted at the access hatch. It was the only way in or out, and I had orders to hold it no matter what. "They broke through," said softly. "The alpha male, the biggest one, he must have weighed 800 pounds, maybe more. He didn't bother with finesse. He just ripped the hatch door off and came down the stairs. My rifle was empty. My pistol was empty. I had a combat knife and about 5 seconds before he reached me." The transport jerked hard as landing gear deployed. Talked over the sound of hydraulics and engine noise. I stabbed him, got him right in the thigh, deep as the blade would go, and you know what he did? He grabbed me by the throat with one hand and lifted me off the ground. His fingers went all the way around my neck. I could feel my vertebrae starting to crack. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. The pressure was enormous. His hand was fully on his throat now, covering the scars. Then he did something I didn't expect. He didn't crush my throat. He opened his mouth and bit me. Those teeth, massive canines that could crack bones, he sank them into my neck, right here. He tapped the scars. 3 teeth. They went in deep, scraping bone. I could taste blood in my mouth. My vision was going black. And in that moment, hanging there with this creature's teeth in my throat, I understood something. He wasn't trying to kill me quickly. He was establishing dominance, marking me, like animals do to intruders in their territory. The transport touched down with a heavy thud. The harnesses began to release automatically. But he made one mistake. He let go with his hand to get a better grip with his jaws, and I still had my knife. So I stabbed him again, and again, and again. In the throat, in the eye, in the soft tissue under the jaw, I stabbed him until he dropped me. And when he finally let go and stumbled back, I crawled to his rifle and put the last magazine through his skull at point-blank range. Stood up, checking his gear by reflex. The others fled when the Alpha went down. We held position until rescue came 2 days later. By then, my throat was infected despite the antibiotics. The bacteria from his mouth had gotten deep into the wound. The doctors said I nearly died 3 times on the operating table. The infection had gone septic. My throat kept swelling shut. "But you lived," said, standing as well. The transport's rear ramp was already lowering, showing the purple-tinted sky of Prime. "I lived. The scars never fully healed. Something about the bite, the bacteria maybe, or the venom we found out they had in their saliva. The tissue calcified weird. That's why it feels like metal. That's why it looks like this." Pulled on his helmet, the seal clicking into place around his collar. "The Coalition scientists found it fascinating when I joined up. Apparently, Bigfoot saliva had unique properties. Who knew?" The team began moving toward the ramp, checking weapons and equipment. Paused beside, his massive frame blocking the light. "Human," the said carefully. "This story, the creature marked you as prey, as defeated, yet you wear those marks as a warrior's honor. I do not understand the human logic." Smiled inside his helmet. "I wear them as a reminder. They remind me that no matter how big something is, no matter how strong or scary, it can still bleed. It can still die. And most importantly, they remind me that humans, we don't quit. We don't surrender. Even when we're outmatched, even when we're facing something that should kill us, we fight back." He started walking toward the ramp. "That's what makes us human. That's what makes us dangerous." The ramp hit the ground and the team deployed into the alien landscape. Above them, the twin suns have cast long shadows across the battlefield. Enemy positions were already lighting up on HUD. The Coalition forces had been pinned down for 3 days by an insurgent army. High casualties, low morale. They needed reinforcements. They needed someone who knew how to fight against impossible odds. Checked his rifle and moved forward with his team. Somewhere across that battlefield, the enemy was waiting. They were big, heavily armed, and professional soldiers who had been fighting this war for decades. But they'd never fought a human seal who had survived a Bigfoot attack. His fingers brushed his throat one more time, feeling the familiar ridges. Let them try their worst. The battlefield was nothing like Earth. The ground was covered in a crystalline fungus that crunched under his boots, releasing spores that glowed faintly in the fatting light. The air tasted metallic, and the gravity was about 15% higher than Earth standard. Every step took more effort, every movement required more energy. But had trained in high-gravity environments. All the human soldiers had. The Coalition forward operating base was 2 kilometers ahead, marked on his HUD as a cluster of prefabricated structures surrounded by energy barriers. The barriers were flickering, not a good sign. It meant the generators were failing or the enemy had found a way to disrupt them. Moved up beside, his heavy plasma cannon held it ready. "The terrain favors ambush predators," the said through the comm channel. "The crystalline growth provides excellent concealment." "Then we move slow and watch our angles," replied. He signaled for the team to spread out into a proper tactical formation. The 3 human Marines took the left flank. The scouts shimmered into near invisibility and moved ahead as forward observers, and the pilot took position in the center with the heavy communication equipment. They moved through the alien landscape like ghosts. Human military doctrine emphasized stealth and precision over raw firepower. It was a philosophy that confused most Coalition species. Why hide when you could simply overpower your enemy with superior numbers and technology? Because sometimes superior numbers and technology weren't enough. The first ambush came from above. 3 warriors dropped from crystalline formations overhead, their combat armor absorbing the impact as they landed among the human Marines. They were reptilian, smaller than humans but faster, with 4 arms that could wield multiple weapons simultaneously. The ambush should have worked. It would have worked against most coalition forces. But the humans had fought in jungles, in cities, in mountains where death could come from any direction. Above, below, beside, it didn't matter. His rifle was up and firing before they hit the ground. 3-round burst, center mass on the nearest target. The alien's shields sparked but held. The Marines were already moving, not away from the threat but toward it, closing distance faster than the expected. Human close quarters combat doctrine was simple and brutal. Get inside the enemy's reach, use aggression and violence of action to overwhelm them, end the threat before it could coordinate a response. One of the Marines, a woman named, slammed her rifle stock into his helmet with enough force to crack the visor. While the alien reeled, she drew her sidearm and put 2 rounds through the damaged faceplate. The dropped. The other 2 Marines were already engaging the remaining hostiles. Human reaction times weren't faster than most species. Human strength wasn't superior. But human aggression, human willingness to accept injury in order to inflict greater injury, that was something special. Moved to support, but the fight was already over. 6 seconds from ambush to enemy neutralized. The Marines checked each other for injuries, their movements economical and practiced. Forward scouts report movement ahead, one of them said through the comm, their translated voice like wind chimes. Large group, 50+ signatures. They are fortified in defensive positions blocking our approach to the base. Brought up the tactical overlay on his HUD. They were right. The enemy had established a strong defensive line using the natural terrain features. Any direct assault would be costly. Can we go around? Asked. Would take hours, said. The base doesn't have hours. Look at those barrier readings. They're at 30% power. If those fail, everyone inside is exposed. He studied the tactical display, his mind automatically running through scenarios. Frontal assault was suicide. Flanking took too long. Artillery wasn't available. Orbital support was blocked by atmospheric interference. Every option was bad. So they needed to make the enemy react instead of act. I have an idea, said slowly, but it's going to sound crazy. The pilot made that chittering laugh sound again. Humans' plans always sound crazy. That is how we know they will work. Couldn't help but smile. All right, here's what we're going to do. They are professional soldiers. They train for conventional warfare, proper tactics, logical enemy behavior. So we're not going to give them any of that. He pulled up a map of the area and started marking positions. You and they are going to set up here about 800 meters out. Maximum range for your plasma cannon. When I give the signal, you light them up. Not aimed fire, just suppression. Make noise, make them think we're softening up their position for an assault. And where will you be? Asked, though his translator carried an undertone that suggested he already knew the answer. Me and the Marines are going to walk right up to their front door. The silence on the comm channel was profound. That is suicide, finally said. Only if they expect it, which they won't, because it's suicide. Started moving forward, checking his ammunition count. How many smoke grenades we got? 12 between the 3 of us. Good, we use them all at once. Create a dense screen. They have thermal imaging, but the spores from this crystalline stuff interfere with it. Combine that with smoke and they'll be half blind. They will still have motion sensors, audio detection, and tactical awareness, protested. Yep, and that's why we're going to be making a lot of noise. Was fully committed to the plan now, his voice taking on that calm certainty that came before action. The scouts will circle wide and start hitting their flanks with precision fire. Nothing sustained, just enough to make them think we're everywhere. Hammers the center. We come up the middle in the confusion. And then, one of the Marines asked, then we do what humans do best. We get violent and scary and we make them break. The team moved into position. Watched the chronometer count down, his breathing slow and steady. The scars on his throat itched slightly, like they always did before a fight. He'd asked doctors about it once. They said it was psychosomatic, his brain's way of preparing him for combat by reminding him of past survival. Thought it was the universe's way of telling him he was about to do something stupid. The signal went out. Plasma cannon lit up the darkening sky with bolts of superheated energy. The crystalline formations exploded into glittering shards where the shots hit. Some found the defensive line, burning through cover and forcing the enemy to hunker down. They opened fire from 3 different positions simultaneously, their crystal-based weapons creating the illusion of a much larger force. Precision shots that forced them to spread their attention. And the Marines moved forward at a dead run. They threw smoke grenades in a rolling pattern, creating a wall of thick gray cover that combined with the glowing spores to create an impenetrable visual barrier. Then they started screaming. It wasn't random noise, it was coordinated psychological warfare. Humans had learned early in their military history that sound could be a weapon. War cries, battle songs, intimidating shouts. They all served the same purpose, to make the enemy afraid, to make them question their position. And humans could make some truly terrifying sounds. His team yelled in English, in Chinese, in Spanish. They made sounds like animals, like machines, like nightmares. They fired their weapons on full automatic, not aiming, just adding to the wall of sound and fury bearing down on the position. Later would learn that the defenders reported hearing dozens of humans, a full company at minimum. Their motion sensors were overwhelmed by the smoke and spores. Their audio detection was useless amid the chaos. All they knew was that something was coming through that smoke, something loud and violent and absolutely fearless. They made their first mistake. They fired blindly into the smoke, giving away their exact positions. The humans adjusted course, moving around the heaviest concentrations of fire. They were inside the enemy defensive line before they realized they'd been flanked from the front. Close quarters combat was every soldier's nightmare. It was personal, brutal, and unforgiving. Training mattered, experience mattered, but most of all, willpower mattered. They were good soldiers, well-trained, well-equipped, disciplined. But they'd never fought anyone quite like humans before. Came through the smoke like an avenging demon, his rifle firing in controlled bursts. Turned toward him, raising 4 weapons simultaneously. Didn't try to dodge or take cover. He charged straight at the alien, closing the distance before they could properly aim. He slammed into the reptilian soldier with his shoulder, using his mass and momentum to knock the alien off balance. While the struggled to recover, jammed his rifle barrel under the lip of the alien's helmet and fired. The dropped. Around him, the Marines were executing the same brutal tactics. They moved as a unit, covering each other, overwhelming individual enemies before moving to the next target. They used their environment, using the crystalline formations as both cover and weapons, breaking off chunks and using them as improvised clubs. It was savage, it was efficient, it was terrifying. The line started to break. It happened suddenly, the way these things always did. 1 soldier fell back, then 2, then a whole squad was retreating in disorder. The retreat became a rout as the scouts pressed the flanks, and plasma fire walked up the center of the position. Didn't pursue. That was how you walked into a counter-ambush or got picked off by a sniper. Instead, he consolidated the position, set up a defensive perimeter, and called for the rest of the team to move up. The path to the coalition base was clear. Casualties? Asked over the comm. Took a graze to the shoulder, armor held, one of the Marines reported. Martinez has some bruising from hand to hand, nothing serious. Scouts report no injuries, same for pilot and the translator rendered. 3 humans and their support team had just broken through 50 entrenched enemy soldiers and taken 0 serious casualties. Knew what the after-action reports would say. They'd call it luck. They'd say the enemy had poor discipline. They'd find reasons that didn't include the obvious truth. Humans were scary when they decided to be. The team reached the coalition base 20 minutes later. The barriers were down to 15%. Inside, the defenders were a mix of species, all looking exhausted and beaten down. A officer, her scales dull with stress, met them at the entrance. "You made it through," she said, her translator struggling with the emotion in her voice. "We detected the engagement, 3 personnel breaking a reinforced position. Command said it was impossible." "Command wasn't there," said simply. He moved past her, already assessing the base's defenses. "What's your situation?" "Critical, we have wounded that need evacuation. Our barrier generators are failing. They have us surrounded on 3 sides, and they've been probing our defenses every few hours. We estimate they'll launch a final assault once the barriers fail completely." "How many defenders do you have?" 43 combat-capable personnel, mostly support staff and technicians. We lost our assault specialists 2 days ago in a failed breakout attempt." did the math in his head. 43 defenders, most of them not combat troops, against an enemy force that likely numbered in the hundreds. The base was in a poor defensive position, the barriers were failing, and reinforcements were at least a day away. It was an impossible situation. "Okay," said, "then we hold." The officer's scales flashed confusion colors. "Hold for how long?" "As long as it takes." Gathered his team and started issuing orders. They had work to do and not much time to do it. Found him an hour later, while was helping reinforce one of the barrier generator bunkers. "Human," the said, "I have been thinking about your story, about the Bigfoot creature that marked you." "Yeah," didn't stop working, using a welding torch to seal a crack in the bunker's armor plating. "You said it marked you as prey, as defeated, but that is not how others see those scars. When soldiers look at you, they do not see a marked victim. They see a warrior who survived something that should have killed him." Finished the weld and straightened up. "What's your point?" The gestured with one massive arm at the base around them. "These defenders, they think they are defeated. They think this base will fall. They look at the tactical situation and see only death, but you look at the same situation and see something different." "I see a fight." "Yes, and that is what makes humans dangerous. You do not accept defeat even when logic says you should. You fought a creature that was stronger, faster, more powerful than you. It marked you as prey, but you killed it anyway. Now you are here in another impossible situation and you simply say, 'We hold,' as if victory is inevitable." Smiled, his hand going to his throat. "Want to know a secret? Victory isn't inevitable. Most of the time we lose, humans die, battles go badly, plans fall apart, but we fight anyway. Because maybe, just maybe, we'll get lucky. And even if we don't, even if we go down, we'll make sure the other guy remembers fighting us." "You are a strange species," said, but there was something like admiration in his translated voice. "Yeah, we really are." They attacked at dawn. They came in waves, professional and coordinated, using combined arms tactics and superior numbers. The coalition defenders fought back with everything they had. The first wave hit the eastern perimeter at exactly 0600 hours. Was already awake, had been awake for hours. Old habits died hard. In the SEALs, you learn to function on minimal sleep, to stay alert when your body screamed for rest. That training served him well now. Through his rifle scope, he watched the advance. They moved in textbook formation, using cover effectively, maintaining fire discipline. These weren't the panicked soldiers from yesterday. These were their main force, and they were out for blood. "Contact east," called over the comm. 50-plus targets advancing in staggered formation. Heavy weapons support spotted at Grid Echo 7. Around him, the coalition defenders scrambled to their positions. The officer, whose name had learned was shouting orders in 3 different languages. The defenders were scared. Could see it in their movements, in the way their hands shook slightly as they checked their weapons. They were right to be scared. This was going to be bad. "Hold fire until they reach the markers," said, his voice calm and steady over the command channel. "Let them commit to the approach. Make every shot count." They advanced to within 200 meters, 150, 100. "Now," said quietly. The base's defensive weapons opened up simultaneously. Energy weapons, projectile cannons, and improvised explosives that had helped place during the night. The killing zone lit up with fire and death. They took casualties but didn't break. They'd expected the defensive fire. They pushed through, their shields absorbing the hits, their heavy weapons returning fire. Plasma bolts slammed into the base's barriers, each impact making the energy field flicker and weaken. Fired carefully, picking targets. Center mass shots on carrying heavy weapons. Aimed shots at what looked like officers or squad leaders. Every bullet counted. There was no resupply coming. The first reached the barrier line. They set up breaching charges while their comrades provided covering fire. Adjusted his aim and shot the demolition specialist through the head. Another immediately took his place. Shot that one too. "They're determined," said from her position 20 meters to left. "Not breaking off." "They know we're weak," replied. "They're going all in." The breaching charges detonated. A section of the barrier flickered and died, creating a gap 3 meters wide. Warriors poured through the opening, their weapons firing. This was the critical moment. The moment when defenders either held the line or broke and ran. Stood up from his cover and walked toward the breach. Not ran, not charged, walked. "Human, what are you doing?" His voice crackled with panic over the comm. Didn't answer, he just kept walking, his rifle up, firing in controlled bursts. He shot the first through the breach, then the second, then the third. He advanced into their line of fire, bullets and plasma bolts cutting the air around him, and he kept shooting. It was insane. It was suicidal. It was exactly what the defenders needed to see. Behind him roared something in his native language and charged forward, his massive plasma cannon laying down suppressing fire. The human Marines followed, shouting their battle cries. Even some of the coalition defenders, inspired or shamed by the humans' fearlessness, left their cover and moved forward. Reached the breach and jumped through, landing in the middle of the assault force. His rifle clicked empty. He drew his sidearm and kept firing. A soldier with all four arms tried to tackle him. Grabbed one of the alien's arms and used his own momentum to throw him into another soldier. Human against four-armed aliens. It shouldn't work, but had spent years adapting human martial arts to alien physiology. He knew where joints bent, where their balance points were, how to use their extra limbs against them. He put it in an arm lock, forcing the alien to drop its weapon. While it struggled, shot two more enemies over the shoulder, using the alien as a living shield. Then he snapped this arm at the elbow and moved on to the next target. The fighting was brutal and personal. Blood, human and alien, mixed with the glowing spores on the ground. The sound was overwhelming, weapons, fire and screaming, and the crunch of bodies hitting crystalline formations. Took a hit to his shoulder, his armor absorbing most of it but the impact spinning him around. He recovered his balance and shot the who'd hit him. Took another hit to his leg, felt something crack, kept fighting. They started to pull back, not in panic this time, but in tactical withdrawal. They'd lost too many soldiers for no real gain. The breach was still contested, and the crazy humans were still fighting like demons. Let them go. He collapsed against a crystalline formation, his legs screaming in protest. His HUD was showing damage warnings all over his armor, but he was alive. They'd held. Medic called out, "Human is down." "I'm fine," protested, but even he could hear the pain in his voice. The base's medical officer, with specialized training in multi-species physiology, scuttled over. Its many eyes examined injuries while its arms began treatment. "Your leg is fractured, your shoulder has significant bruising, you have minor plasma burns on your left side. You are very much not fine, human." "Can I walk?" "Not recommended." "Can I shoot?" This translator made a sound of exasperation. "Yes, you can still shoot, but you should be in the medical bay, not on the defensive line." Levered himself upright, using his rifle as a crutch. "Get me a stimulant shot and some pain suppressors. They will be back probably within the hour. They're going to hit us again while they think we're weak." "You are weak," the medic protested. "That's why we need to hit them first." Had made her way to his position. Her scales were showing colors database identified as confusion mixed with awe. "You're planning a counterattack? Now, with your injuries." "Best time to do it." They're regrouping, treating their own wounded, probably arguing about how the assault failed. They won't expect us to come to them. "Because it's insane," said. "Yeah, that's why it'll work." Looked at, who had taken some hits himself but was still standing. "How's your ammunition?" "Sufficient for one more engagement, maybe two." "Scouts." "Present and operational," came the chiming response over the comm. "Though we question the tactical soundness of this plan." "Noted, Marines." "Ready to rock," said. Martinez, sporting a nasty cut across his cheek, gave a thumbs up. "Okay, here's the play. Scouts, I need you to find their command post. Shouldn't be hard, look for the biggest concentration of communication equipment and officers. You and they are going to create a diversion on their western flank. Make them think that's where the attack is coming from." "And you?" asked. "Me and the Marines are going to take out their command structure. 3 wounded humans against an enemy command post. 4 if you count in on the diversion, 5 if the helps. Come on, those are good odds." Tested his weight on his injured leg and winced. "Okay, maybe not good, but workable." The medic finished applying the emergency medical treatments. Felt the stimulants hit his system, sharp and electric. The pain in his leg faded to a manageable throb. He wouldn't be running any marathons, but he could fight. "You are all insane," said. But she was checking her own weapon, her scales shifting to colors that's database said indicated determination. But I am coming with you. You're the base commander. Yes, which means I lead from the front. That is the way. Grinned, all right then. 5 humans and a very brave against an enemy command post. Now those are definitely good odds. They left the base through a service tunnel that emerged half a kilometer north of the perimeter. The scouts had mapped the terrain during the night, finding all the approaches and weak points in the defensive positions. Moving through the alien landscape with a fractured leg and combat wounds was an exercise in controlled agony, but had been through worse. That night in the Canadian Rockies, with Bigfoot teeth in his throat and his blood soaking into the snow, that had been worse. This was just pain. Pain was temporary. The scouts guided them through a maze of crystalline formations, using the natural cover to avoid patrols. Twice they had to freeze in place while enemy soldiers passed within meters of their position. Held his breath, counting heartbeats, waiting for the all-clear signal. They reached Overwatch position on a ridge overlooking the command post. It was well defended, ringed with heavy weapons emplacements and shield generators. At least 30 soldiers visible, probably more inside the structures. "This is impossible," whispered. "Yeah, agreed. I'm getting really tired of hearing that word." He studied the layout, his tactical mind automatically calculating approach vectors, firing lanes, and escape routes. The command post was built into a natural depression, using the terrain for additional protection. Smart. Hard to assault from above, well protected from indirect fire. But that meant the felt safe, and feeling safe made you complacent. "Wait for diversion," said. "When their attention is pulled west, we move fast and quiet, get as close as we can before they spot us. Then we go loud and violent, and we don't stop until we're through." "Through to where?" Martinez asked. "Wherever we end up. If we're lucky, we take out their command staff and make it back to base. If we're not lucky, we take out their command staff and die here. Either way, the defenders at the base get a chance." "You have a very flexible definition of success," observed. "Welcome to human military doctrine." Diversion started right on time. Massive plasma bolts lit up the western sky, and this communication equipment began broadcasting false signals suggesting a major assault in that sector. The command post reacted immediately, redirecting troops and attention to the perceived threat. "Now," said. They moved down the ridge using every scrap of cover. His leg was on fire, each step sending jolts of pain up his spine. He ignored it. Pain was just information. It couldn't stop you unless you let it. They got within 50 meters before a sentry spotted them. The alien opened his mouth to raise the alarm. His rifle coughed once, suppressed shot, and the sentry dropped. But the damage was done. Other sentries had seen their comrade fall. Alarm calls went out. "Contact," shouted, all pretense of stealth abandoned. "Move, move, move." They charged the command post, weapons firing. The defenders, already disorganized by the diversion, struggled to respond to this new threat from an unexpected direction. Led the assault, limping but relentless, his rifle barking in controlled bursts. A heavy gunner swung a plasma cannon toward them. Shot him before he could fire, her scaled hands steady on her weapon. The shields held, but the impact staggered him long enough for to close distance and put 3 rounds through the alien's helmet visor. They reached the command structure, a prefabricated building covered in communication arrays. Martinez kicked in the door and they poured inside. The interior was organized chaos. Officers shouting orders, technicians working tactical displays, runners carrying messages. Everyone armed, everyone a threat. What followed was brutal close-quarters combat in a confined space. No tactics, no strategy, just violence and speed, and the desperate need to overwhelm the enemy before they could coordinate a response. Shot an officer reaching for his sidearm. Used her rifle stock to smash a technician's head into a control console. Moving with surprising speed and grace, disarmed 2 soldiers and shot them both before they could recover. The fighting spilled from room to room. His injured leg finally gave out and he went down hard. A warrior loomed over him, weapon raised. Rolled, grabbed a piece of broken equipment and threw it into the alien's face. While the reel drew his combat knife and stabbed upward, finding the gap between armor plates. Martinez was down, blood pouring from a wound in his side. Was screaming into her comm, calling for evacuation. Was holding a doorway against multiple attackers, her scales flashing colors that's concussed brain couldn't properly interpret. They were going to die here. Then's voice came over the comm, impossibly loud and unmistakably jubilant. Human, the main force is in full retreat. Repeat, enemy is withdrawing from all positions. Dragged himself to a window and looked out. They was right. They were pulling back not in disorder but in organized withdrawal. Their command structure destroyed, their assault failed, they were cutting their losses and retreating. The humans had won. Started laughing, he couldn't help it. They'd been outnumbered in an impossible situation, and they'd won anyway. "You are bleeding extensively," said, kneeling beside him. "You need immediate medical attention." "Yeah," agreed, his hand going to his throat to touch the old scars. "Yeah, I probably do." The evacuation shuttles arrived 6 hours later. By then, had been patched up enough to walk with assistance. The base defenders lined up to watch the humans leave, their expressions ranging from confusion to respect to something that might have been fear. Accompanied to the shuttle, his massive frame providing support. "You told me once," they said, "that the scars on your throat reminded you that anything can bleed, that anything can die." "Yeah. What will this battle remind you of?" Thought about it as they walked. He thought about the defenders who'd been ready to give up until they saw humans refuse to quit. He thought about leading a suicidal charge because someone had to. He thought about fighting despite injuries because stopping meant dying. "It'll remind me," said slowly, "that humans are at our best when things are at their worst. When the situation is impossible, when the odds are overwhelming, when logic says we should surrender. That's when we show what we really are." "And what is that?" Smiled, his hand touching his throat one more time. "Scary." The shuttle lifted off, taking them away from Prime. Below, the coalition base was already being reinforced, fresh troops and supplies arriving now that they had withdrawn. Knew what the reports would say. They'd talk about tactical decisions and strategic objectives. They'd analyze the battle with charts and graphs. They'd find logical reasons for the human victory. But the aliens who'd been there, who'd watched 3 humans walk into enemy fire like it didn't matter, who'd seen keep fighting with a broken leg and combat wounds, they would know the truth. Humans were dangerous, not because they were stronger or faster or smarter, but because they simply refused to accept defeat. The recovery took 3 weeks, spent most of it in the Coalition medical station orbiting Prime, undergoing treatments that would have seemed like magic back on Earth 20 years ago. Bone regeneration, tissue repair, cellular reconstruction. The doctors said he'd be back to full combat readiness within a month. But the physical recovery was the easy part. Word of the Prime battle had spread through the Coalition forces like wildfire. 3 humans and a small support team had broken through enemy lines, held an indefensible position, and then destroyed the enemy command structure in a suicide assault that somehow everyone survived. The facts were documented, undeniable. What wasn't documented was the effect it had on Coalition morale. Noticed it in the way other soldiers looked at him. Not just respect, though there was plenty of that. There was something else. Unease, wariness. The look you gave to something dangerous that you weren't quite sure you should trust. "They're afraid of you," said one day. She'd come to visit in the medical bay, her scales now back to their healthy iridescent colors. "All of you humans, they've seen what you're capable of, and it frightens them." Was undergoing physical therapy, testing his newly regenerated leg on a treadmill. The limb felt strange, like it was his but also not quite his. The bones were denser than before, reinforced with Coalition medical technology. He was actually stronger now than before the injury. "We're on the same side," said. "They shouldn't be afraid." But they are, because they wonder what would happen if humans decided not to be on their side. Translator carried an unusual tone. Something had learned meant she was about to say something uncomfortable. "There are discussions, high level, about whether allowing humans into Coalition military forces was wise." "Stop the treadmill. Seriously, we just saved one of their bases." And that is precisely the problem. 3 humans did what an entire battalion could not. It makes some species uncomfortable. It makes them ask questions. What if humans decide they want to lead instead of follow? What if your species decides the Coalition should operate by human rules instead of consensus? "That's not how we think." "Are you certain?" Moved closer, her movements graceful despite her heavily muscled frame. "I have been researching human military history since Prime. Your species has a pattern. You fight wars against each other, brutal conflicts that last for years. Then you stop fighting, make peace, and integrate your former enemies into allies. You did this with Germany, with Japan, with Vietnam. Even among yourselves, you fight and then reconcile. Yeah, so other species do not work this way. When they go to war, they fight until one side is extinct. They have been in conflict with them for 3,000 years without pause. They remember our enemies for generations. But humans, you forget. Or you choose to forget. You have this ability to move past conflict. Thought about it, he'd never really considered it that way before. I guess that's a good thing. Is it, or does it mean that humans can justify any action, any violence, because you know you can make peace later? That you can be as brutal as necessary because reconciliation is always possible? The words hit harder than expected. He resumed walking on the treadmill, his new leg moving smoothly. You're saying other species think we're dangerous because we can turn our violence on and off. I am saying that most species are violent or peaceful, aggressive or diplomatic. Humans are both, and you switch between them so easily that it is disturbing. You can share a meal with someone and then kill them without hesitation if they become a threat. You can be kind and compassionate one moment and absolutely ruthless the next. Remembered his SEAL training. They'd called it the gray man concept. The ability to blend in, to appear normal and harmless, right up until the moment you needed to be deadly. Every operator learned it. Every special forces soldier in every human military practiced it. Maybe that is what makes us human, said quietly. We're not one thing, we're everything. We can adapt to any situation because we don't lock ourselves into one way of being. That is what frightens them, said. That adaptability, that flexibility. Your species is only 15 years into space and already you're serving in military units, trading with established corporations, settling colony worlds. You should still be learning, still adjusting. Instead, you're thriving, excelling, and some species wonder where it will end. Before could respond, his comm unit chirped. Priority message from Coalition Command. He accepted the call, and a holographic projection appeared, showing a senior commander, her crystalline body refracting the medical bay's lights into complex patterns. Human, you are hereby summoned to Coalition High Command for debriefing regarding the Prime engagement. You will depart immediately upon medical clearance. Yes, sir, said automatically. The hologram paused. I am female, not male. Your translators should have conveyed this. Sorry, sir, I mean, ma'am, it's a human military tradition. We call all superior officers, sir, regardless of gender. Another oddity to add to the list. The commander's tone was unreadable. You will also be evaluated for potential command positions within the coalition forces. Your actions at Prime suggest leadership capabilities. The hologram winked out. Scales flashed colors recognized as amusement. A command position, they're promoting you. Or they're trying to figure out what to do with me, stepped off the treadmill. His leg felt strong, stable, better than before. When does a weapon stop being useful and start being dangerous? When it can think for itself. The trip to Coalition High Command took 5 days via faster-than-light transport. Spent the time reviewing after-action reports and studying Coalition military structure. What he found was both impressive and deeply flawed. The Coalition had existed for over 2,000 years. It was a voluntary alliance of species who agreed to mutual defense and shared resources. Their military doctrine was based on consensus, with each species contributing according to their strengths. Heavy assault units, air support, reconnaissance, shock troops. It worked well against external threats, species who weren't part of the Coalition. But it was slow, bureaucratic, and resistant to change. Humans had been part of the Coalition for only 15 years, but already they were changing things. Human tactics were being studied and adapted. Human weapons were being integrated into Coalition arsenals. Human training methods were being tested across multiple species. Some saw it as progress, others saw it as contamination. Coalition High Command was located on a massive space station orbiting a neutron star. The station was ancient, built by a species that had gone extinct ago and repurposed by the Coalition. Walking through its corridors was like walking through living history, each section reflecting the architecture and aesthetics of different member species. Was escorted to a conference room that could hold representatives from all 27 Coalition species. Only about half were present for this meeting. That was either a good sign or a very bad one. The commander from the hologram presided. Her name was Crystal Shard Reflecting Dawn, which the translators shortened to Commander Crystal for simplicity. Human, you stand before this assembly to provide testimony regarding the Prime engagement. Speak truthfully and completely. Stood at attention, his dress uniform feeling strange after weeks in combat gear. Yes, Commander. What followed was 3 hours of detailed questioning. Every decision, every action, every casualty was examined and analyzed. Answered honestly, holding nothing back. He explained the breach assault, the counterattack, the destruction of the enemy command post. When he finished, the room was silent. Finally, a general spoke up. His name was Rax, and his service record dated back 60 years. You walked into enemy fire deliberately, without hesitation. Why? Someone had to, said simply. That is not an answer, that is a platitude. Met the size. With respect, General, it is the answer. The defenders were losing morale. They were ready to surrender or die. Someone had to show them that the fight wasn't over, that there was still a chance, so I walked into their fire to prove it. You could have died. Yes, sir. Your death would have served no tactical purpose. My death might not have, but my willingness to die for the defense of that base, that had purpose. It told every defender there that someone believed victory was possible, and belief, General, is sometimes more powerful than weapons. Another commander, whose translator marked her as Admiral Fleet Pattern, spoke up. You are describing psychological warfare directed at your own allies. Considered that? Maybe. Or maybe I was just refusing to let good soldiers die thinking they'd been abandoned. You endangered yourself unnecessarily. I did what was necessary to hold the line. The questioning continued, but could feel the mood in the room shifting. Some of the commanders were nodding, understanding what he'd done even if they didn't agree with it. Others looked more disturbed than before. Finally, Commander Crystal called for a recess, was dismissed to wait outside while the assembly deliberated. Found him in the corridor, the looking uncomfortable in his own dress uniform. Human, I have been called to testify as well. About Prime. Yes, they wish to understand how a mixed species team operated so effectively. They want to know if it can be replicated. Leaned against the wall, his newly regenerated leg aching slightly. What are you going to tell them? His crest rose and fell, a sign of uncertainty. The truth, that human tactics are effective but require a mindset that most species find difficult to adopt. That your willingness to accept casualties in exchange for strategic advantage is both your greatest strength and most troubling characteristic. You make it sound like we're crazy. Are you not? Translator carried what might have been humor. You charge into situations that logic says will kill you. You fight when you should retreat. You attack when you should defend. By any rational standard, human military doctrine is insane. And yet it works. Yes, that is what troubles the High Command. If insanity is effective, what does that say about our rational approaches? Thought about his first firefight as a SEAL back on Earth. They'd been outnumbered and by a terrorist cell in a compound in the Middle East. The logical move was to call in air support and wait. Instead, their team leader had simply said, let's go get them, and led a direct assault. It shouldn't have worked. By all tactical logic, it should have been a disaster. But they'd won, because sometimes aggression and speed mattered more than perfect planning. Maybe, said slowly, the galaxy has been doing things the rational way for so long that everyone forgot there are other approaches. Maybe that's what humans bring to the coalition. Not better weapons or stronger bodies, just a different way of thinking about problems. A way of thinking that terrifies many species. Yeah, I'm starting to get that. The assembly reconvened 4 hours later, was called back in along with and the human Marines from Prime. They stood in a line before the assembled commanders. Commander Crystal's crystalline body caught the light as she moved. This assembly has reviewed all testimony and evidence regarding the Prime engagement. We have reached several conclusions. Kept his expression neutral, but his heart was racing. First, the actions of Human and his team were tactically sound given the constraints of the situation. Second, the unconventional nature of human military doctrine, while effective, raises concerns about integration with coalition forces. Third, the psychological impact of human combat behavior on both allies and enemies requires further study. She paused, her body refracting light into sharp patterns. It is the judgment of this assembly that human military personnel possess unique capabilities that can benefit the coalition. However, these capabilities must be carefully managed and directed. Here it comes, thought, the restrictions, the limitations, the careful control. Therefore, human is hereby promoted to the rank of coalition commander and assigned to form and lead a specialized rapid response unit. This unit will consist of human personnel supplemented by volunteers from other species who demonstrate the psychological resilience to operate alongside humans in high-risk scenarios. Blinked, that was not what he'd expected. Commander. You humans have proven effective in impossible situations. Very well, we will give you the impossible situations. Your unit will deploy where conventional forces cannot succeed. You will take the missions that logic says are unwinnable, and you will either prove that human methods are superior or you will fail and we will have our answer. It was a test, maybe even a trap, but it was also an opportunity. I accept, said. Of course you do, Commander Crystal said, and her tone suggested that might have been amusement. Only a human would accept command of a unit designed to face certain death on a regular basis. The meeting dissolved into administrative details. Assignments, authority levels, resource allocations. Let it wash over him, his mind already working on the real problem. He needed a team, not just humans, though they'd form the core. He needed aliens who could work with human tactics, who wouldn't freeze up when things went sideways, who could adapt to the chaos that seemed to follow humans everywhere. He needed soldiers who were a little bit crazy. After the meeting approached him, I wish to join your unit. You sure Commander Crystal wasn't joking? This is going to be dangerous work. I am. We pride ourselves on courage in battle. Besides, her scales flashed colors had learned meant determination mixed with humor. I have already survived one impossible situation with you. What are a few more? Was next. I also volunteer the respect, strength, and courage. You have both, human. I would be honored to serve under your command. One by one, volunteers came forward. The human Marines from Prime, obviously. 2 scouts who'd been part of the original mission. A pilot who'd flown support during the battle. Others that didn't know yet, aliens from species he barely recognized. All of them willing to take the impossible missions. All of them willing to fight alongside the scary humans. Felt something unfamiliar in his chest. Pride, maybe, or responsibility, probably both. His hand went to his throat, touching the old scars. The marks that reminded him anything could bleed, that nothing was truly invincible. That survival often came down to sheer stubborn refusal to die. Now he had a whole unit of soldiers who thought the same way. 6 months later, stood on the bridge of the coalition warship Relentless Dawn, watching his unit conduct training exercises in the asteroid field below. The ship was an older model, scheduled for decommission before had requested it. The coalition brass had been happy to give him what they considered outdated equipment. After all, his unit was expected to fail. But knew something they didn't. Old didn't mean useless. The Relentless Dawn had good bones, solid construction, and systems that were proven reliable. More importantly, it could be modified, and had learned a lot about improvisation in his years as a SEAL. Contact at point 73, called out Lieutenant Wei, one of the human Marines now serving as tactical officer. No relation despite the shared surname. Looks like our scouts found the objective. Pulled up the tactical display. His unit had grown to 43 members, mixing humans with volunteers from 12 different species. They called themselves the Breakers, because they broke things. Enemy formations, impossible defenses, the conventional rules of warfare. They broke everything they touched. How long did it take them? Asked. 17 minutes. The scenario called for a 30-minute search window. Smiled. The scouts had learned to think like humans, anticipating unconventional hiding spots, and using aggressive search patterns instead of the methodical approach their species normally favored. It was producing results. Mark that as passed. Cue up Scenario 7. Scenario 7 was brutal. A hostage rescue in a station that was rigged to explode if the wrong sequence of events occurred. The scenario had been designed by Coalition Special Operations Command as a test. They'd told it was unsolvable, that it existed only to teach soldiers when to withdraw. Was fairly certain they'd made it extra difficult just to prove humans could fail. Breaker Team 1, you're up, said into the comm. Remember, no prep time, you go in cold just like the real thing. Roger that, Commander, Kame's voice, that had taken to human military terminology with enthusiasm. Breaker 1 is moving to entry point. Watched through the drones as his team approached the target. Led the assault element, his massive frame enhanced with customized armor that made him look like a walking tank. Beside him moved, her reflexes perfect for point defense. 3 humans, 2, and an atmospheric specialist named Wind-Through Tunnels rounded out the team. They hit the entry point hard and fast, breaching with shaped charges that had designed specifically for station penetration. The defense systems activated immediately, automated turrets tracking the intruders. Suppressors up, called. The team deployed portable shield generators, coalition tech modified with human additions that made them more mobile but less protective. A trade-off that conventional doctrine said was foolish. But conventional doctrine assumed you'd take cover and hold position. The breakers never stayed still long enough for the trade-off to matter. They moved through the station like a precision strike force, each member knowing their role without needing constant communication. The specialists disabled security systems. Wind-Through Tunnels used atmospheric sensors to track the hostages through the station's ventilation. The humans pushed forward aggressively, keeping the automated defenses focused on them while the aliens worked their magic. Hostages located, one of the humans reported. Base 7, just like the intelligence suggested. Except the intelligence was planted, Lieutenant Wei said from beside. There's a secondary explosive rigged to the bay door. They trip that, the whole scenario fails. Had spotted it too. The scenario was designed to punish straightforward thinking. The obvious approach led to disaster. You were supposed to recognize the trap and call for specialist support, which would take time you didn't have. The hostages would die, and the scenario would record a failure. But didn't call for support. Instead, he posted at the bay door and took his team down a maintenance corridor that wasn't on the official station maps. Felt pride surge through him. The had learned to think like a human operator. Don't go through the door if the door is trapped. Find another way in. 3 minutes later, his team emerged in the hostage bay through a ventilation shaft, completely bypassing the trapped entrance. They secured the hostages and were moving to extraction before the scenario even registered what had happened. Scenario complete, the computer announced. Hostages secured with 0 casualties. Time to completion, 12 minutes. Current record for this scenario is 43 minutes with 80% casualties. Lieutenant Wei whistled. They just crushed it. Log it and send the results to Special Operations Command, said, with a note that we're ready for real deployment. You think they'll approve us? No, but I want them to know we're ready anyway. The comm unit buzzed with an incoming priority transmission. Accepted it, and Commander Crystal's holographic form appeared on the bridge. Commander, I have a mission for your unit. That was fast, straightened. We're ready, Commander. This is not a training exercise. This is an active combat deployment with high probability of casualties. The commander's crystalline body was refracting light in patterns had learned meant serious concern. The colony world Epsilon Reach has been overrun by extremists. They are holding approximately 3,000 colonists hostage and have threatened to execute them if coalition forces intervene. Pulled up the tactical data as it came through. Epsilon Reach was a newer colony, mostly agricultural, lightly defended. The force was estimated at 200 fighters, well-armed and dug into defensive positions throughout the colony's main settlement. What's the current plan? Asked. There isn't one. Conventional assault would result in massive civilian casualties. They have dispersed the hostages throughout the settlement, making targeted strikes impossible. Negotiation has failed. The extremists are demanding complete coalition withdrawal from 3 systems and reparations for historical grievances. Obviously, we cannot comply. So you're sending us? Yes, your unit specializes in impossible situations. 3,000 lives depend on your ability to do what conventional forces cannot. Commander Crystal paused. I must be clear, Commander. This mission has a projected survival rate of less than 20% for your team. The coalition will understand if you decline. Thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. We accept. When do we deploy? Immediately. You have 18 hours until the deadline expires. The hologram cut out, turned to Lieutenant Wei. Recall all personnel, combat deployment. We leave in 30 minutes. Yes, sir, the lieutenant paused. Commander, the survival rate is based on conventional approaches. We're not conventional. Was already pulling up detailed maps of Epsilon Reach, his mind racing through possibilities. Get me everything we have on extremist tactics. I want to know how they think, how they fight, what they're afraid of. 30 minutes later, the relentless Dawn was breaking orbit, its faster-than-light drive engaged. Gathered his unit in the briefing room, 43 soldiers from different species who'd all volunteered to face impossible odds. Here's what we know, began, pulling up the tactical display. 200 fighters, 3,000 hostages, 18 hours until they start executing civilians. The settlement is built around a central hub with residential areas radiating outward. They have fortified the hub and scattered hostages throughout the residential zones. Standard dispersal tactic, observed, makes surgical strikes impossible without civilian casualties. Right, any conventional assault triggers mass executions. They know this. They're counting on it. Zoomed in on the settlement layout. But they've made one mistake. They're thinking conventionally, too. They expect us to either negotiate or attempt a careful, methodical rescue operation. What are we going to do instead? Asked. Smiled, and several of the alien members of his team made sounds of anticipation. They'd learned to recognize that particular human expression. It meant had an idea, and his ideas were usually terrifying. We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to be scary. He outlined the plan over the next hour. It was insane. It was risky. Several team members pointed out the numerous ways it could go catastrophically wrong. Agreed with every objection and proceeded with the plan anyway. The relentless Dawn entered Epsilon Reach orbit 14 hours before the deadline. They sent an immediate transmission warning them to withdraw or face civilian casualties. Had Lieutenant Wei send a response? A simple message, no words, just an image. A picture of his throat, the 3 parallel marks clearly visible. They demanded to know what it meant. Didn't answer. He just launched every drop pod on the ship simultaneously. 43 pods lit up the sky over Epsilon Reach, streaking down through the atmosphere like meteors. The fighters scrambled to track them, expecting a dispersed landing pattern that they could respond to piecemeal. But the pods didn't land in the settlement. They landed in a circle around it, 2 kilometers out, all hitting within seconds of each other. All teams sound off, called over the comm as he unstrapped from his pod. One by one, his unit checked in. All pods had landed successfully. 0 casualties on insertion. Execute Phase 1, ordered. Phase 1 was psychological warfare. Had learned from the best, from his own experience in the Canadian Rockies. You didn't start with violence, you started with fear. The breakers began making noise. Not random noise, coordinated noise. They played recordings of human war cries mixed with the sounds of battle roars and challenge calls. They fired weapons into the air, creating walls of sound that echoed across the settlement. They used speakers to broadcast synthesized sounds, frequencies that made physiology uncomfortable. And they moved in the darkness, circling the settlement, always visible on the horizon but never attacking. They're trying to provoke us, one of the humans said. His name was Jackson, a former Army Ranger who joined the unit after hearing about Prime. Get us to come out and fight. They're trying to scare us, corrected. Big difference. The extremists had enough discipline not to respond to the provocation. They held their positions, weapons trained on the hostages, waiting for the coalition forces to make a move. Let the psychological assault continue for 2 hours. Then he sent a second message to another image. This time it showed in the medical bay, his throat being torn open by Bigfoot teeth. The commander responded personally. Your scare tactics will not work, human. We are professional soldiers. We do not fear noises in the dark. Sent a third image. The Bigfoot dead on the ground, standing over it with a bloody knife. We are not animals, the commander transmitted. We are warriors of the Dominion. Your psychological warfare is transparent and ineffective. Smiled, though was lying. Fear was creeping into his voice, stress showing in his speech patterns. The psychological assault was working. Phase 2, ordered. Phase 2 was infiltration. The scouts had been moving during the psychological assault, using the noise and distraction to get close to the settlement. Now they went to work. their crystalline bodies nearly invisible in the darkness. They mapped every position, every hostage location, every defensive fortification. They transmitted the data back to in real time, building a complete picture of the enemy's dispositions. "I count hostile positions at 87 locations," Wind-Through Tunnels reported. His atmospheric sensors could detect the carbon dioxide signatures of individuals, letting him track personnel even through walls. Hostages concentrated in 12 primary locations. Estimated guard ratio is 1 per 15 civilians. Studied the data. They were spread thin, trying to cover too many positions with too few soldiers. They were committed to their dispersal strategy, which meant they couldn't concentrate forces without leaving hostages unguarded. "They're vulnerable," observed, "but any assault still risks civilian casualties." "Any conventional assault," corrected, "but we're not going to assault them." "Then what are we going to do?" "We're going to make them think we already have." Phase 3 was the tricky part. It required perfect timing, perfect coordination, and a willingness to trust that aliens could execute a very human tactic. The breakers split into small teams, each team assigned to a specific hostage location. They moved silently through the darkness, using the settlement's own infrastructure for cover. No noise now, no dramatic displays, just professional operators doing what they did best. They reached their positions at exactly 0300 hours, 2 hours before the deadline. "All teams in position," whispered into the comm. "Confirm ready status," came the replies, one after another. 43 soldiers holding positions within meters of hostile forces waiting for the signal. Sent the final transmission to the commander. No images this time, just words. "We are inside your perimeter. We have eyes on every hostage location. We can eliminate your fighters simultaneously before you can react. But we don't want to do that. We want you to surrender." The commander's response was immediate and aggressive. "You lie. You are still outside the settlement. Our sensors show no intrusions." "Check your guard post, the one in residential section 3. There was a pause, then alarms started blaring in the settlement. They had checked the guard post. They'd found their sentries unconscious, disarmed by scouts using non-lethal techniques. The sentries were unharmed but restrained, proof that the breakers had been inside the settlement the entire time. "How did you?" the commander started. "It doesn't matter how," interrupted. "What matters is that we're in position to end this right now. Every hostage location, every defensive position, we have you surrounded from within your own perimeter. You cannot strike without causing civilian casualties. You're right, in a conventional assault, hostages would die, but we don't do conventional." His voice went hard. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to order your soldiers to stand down. You're going to release the hostages, and you're going to surrender. Because if you don't, I'm going to turn my unit loose, and they are going to make you wish you had." "Empty threats." "Are they? I survived a 10-foot-tall predator trying to kill me with its bare hands. My unit survived prime against odds that should have been impossible. We specialize in doing things that logic says can't be done. So ask yourself, Commander, do you really want to find out what we're capable of when we stop playing nice?" The silence stretched out. Could almost hear the commander thinking, weighing options, calculating odds. "What assurances do we have?" the finally asked. "My word that you and your soldiers will be treated according to coalition military law. Imprisonment, not execution. Trial, not summary judgment. You'll live, and so will everyone else." Paused. "That's a better deal than you'll get if shooting starts." More silence. Waited, letting the pressure build. His hand touched his throat, a reminder of another confrontation, another moment when violence and restraint balanced on a knife's edge. "We have your assurance personally?" they asked. "The word of human." "You have my word." Another pause, then, "Very well. I am ordering my soldiers to stand down." It took 3 hours to process the surrender. They came out in groups, weapons deactivated, hands visible. The hostages were evacuated by coalition transport, scared but unharmed. Its unit maintained security throughout, professional and disciplined. Not a single shot had been fired in anger, not one civilian casualty, not one soldier injured. The galaxy had been expecting a bloodbath. Instead, they got a textbook example of how to resolve a hostage situation without violence. Commander Crystal arrived on the surface 6 hours later. She found overseeing the final stages of the operation, coordinating with coalition security forces who'd arrived to take custody of the prisoners. "Commander," she said, her crystalline body refracting the rising sun into rainbow patterns. "I must confess, I expected this mission to end very differently." "Yeah, how'd you think it would end?" "With most of your unit dead and the hostages killed in the crossfire, that is what every tactical simulation predicted." She moved closer. "How did you achieve this result?" Shrugged. "We scared them, made them think we were everywhere, that resistance was hopeless. Then we offered them a way out that let them keep their honor and their lives." "You bluffed." "Mostly, we could have actually carried out the assault if we'd needed to. But we didn't need to. Sometimes the threat of violence is more effective than violence itself. That is not a principle most species understand." "Maybe that's the problem." Looked at the surrendered soldiers being processed. They looked deflated, defeated, but alive. "Everyone assumes that because humans can be violent, we prefer violence, but that's backwards. We can be violent, so we understand violence, so we know when violence isn't the answer." Commander Crystal made a sound her translator rendered as thoughtful contemplation. "The Coalition Command will want a full briefing on your methods." "They can have it, not that they'll like it. Because your methods cannot be easily replicated. They require specific personality traits, specific cultural conditioning, specific willingness to take risks that most species find unacceptable. In other words, they require humans. Or those willing to think like humans, which is apparently possible given your unit's composition and performance." Commander Crystal's body refracted light in patterns had learned meant serious consideration. "The Coalition has been operating on specific principles for thousands of years, Commander. Consensus, caution, calculation. Your species challenges all of that. And that scares people." "Yes, but perhaps being scared is not entirely a bad thing. Perhaps the Coalition has grown too comfortable, too certain of its methods. Perhaps we needed humans to remind us that there are always other approaches, other solutions, other ways of thinking about problems." His hand went to his throat, touching the old scars. "A Bigfoot once tried to kill me by biting my throat. He marked me as prey, as defeated, but I killed him instead. These scars remind me that nothing is certain, that the expected outcome isn't always the actual outcome, that survival sometimes requires doing things that seem impossible. And now you lead a unit dedicated to accomplishing the impossible." "Yeah, funny how things work out." Commander Crystal prepared to depart, then paused. "One more question, Commander. When you sent those images to the Commander, the pictures of your scars, what were you trying to communicate?" Smiled. "That I had survived something scarier than them, that I had faced death and walked away, that no matter how tough they thought they were, I was tougher, because I'm human and humans don't quit. Psychological warfare directed at the enemy. The best kind." The relentless dawn departed Epsilon Reach 4 hours later, stood on the bridge, watching the planet recede in the... His unit was scattered throughout the ship, some sleeping, some cleaning equipment, some reviewing the operation for lessons learned. They'd done the impossible again, saved 3,000 lives without firing a shot in anger, defeated 200 soldiers through intimidation and deception, proved that human methods could work even in the most delicate situations. The comm unit buzzed, multiple incoming transmissions, news outlets from across the Coalition all wanting interviews, military commands requesting briefings, politicians asking questions. Ignored them all, they'd talk when they were ready. Right now his unit needed rest. Appeared on the bridge, looking tired but satisfied. "Human, the crew is asking when we will receive our next impossible mission." "Probably soon. The galaxy is a big place with lots of problems." "They are eager to face these problems. Your human attitude is apparently contagious." Laughed. "Is that a complaint?" "No, an observation." The move to stand beside at the... "I have been thinking about your throat scars, about what they represent." "Yeah." "They represent survival, adaptation, the refusal to accept defeat. These are not uniquely human traits, but humans express them in ways that other species do not. You take your wounds and make them strengths. You take your defeats and turn them into victories. You take the impossible and make it routine." "That's a generous interpretation." "It is an accurate interpretation." His crest rose in what recognized as respect. The galaxy feared humans when you first joined the coalition. We feared your violence, your aggression, your unpredictability. But perhaps we feared the wrong things. What should you have feared? Your optimism, your belief that any problem can be solved, any enemy can be defeated, any obstacle can be overcome. That is far more dangerous than any weapon, because it means humans will never stop trying, never accept limitations, never acknowledge when something is truly impossible. Touched his scars one final time. You're right, we won't, because we're human, and being human means we're too stubborn to know when we're supposed to quit. The relentless dawn jumped to faster than light speed, leaving Epsilon Reach behind. Ahead lay more impossible missions, more situations that conventional wisdom said couldn't be solved, more opportunities to prove that humans belonged among the stars. Smiled, his throat itched slightly, the old scars reminding him of where he'd been and what he'd survived. The galaxy thought it had seen what humans were capable of. It had no idea. The real adventure was just beginning. The galaxy had no idea what it was in for. And sometimes, that refusal was enough to change the outcome of an impossible battle. And showed them what it meant to be human. The humans were here,